Do you have any like bosses or like enemies that you kind of like you like, oh man, I really like the design of this character?
Okay, I'm glad that, well, I brought one of them, which was Heat Man. I thought that was such a cool idea.
Yeah.
The other one is Alien Wiley, which is the final boss of Mega Man 2. And what's a really cool little trivia note here for those that don't know, it is the only Mega Man game to feature an alien as a boss.
Oh, interesting.
All the way back then in number 2, and then from there forward for the classic series, they do not use any aliens to go ahead and represent as bosses. They left it for just that one specificity, and I thought that was really cool because I would have assumed at some point they're going to use a different shape alien or a something else at some time. That's just just because you eventually think run out of ideas, but they've done a really good job of constantly switching it around. Now, here's one boss that made no sense to me what he looked like or whatever back in the day, was Flashman.
Yeah.
Flashman has the ability Time Stopper.
Right.
It stops time. No one can move. Only the user can keep on moving. And I was like, well, what are you? I know you can do this, but you don't seem like the rest of your ability. Like, everyone else kind of looked like their ability. Metal Man had had the doctor's look to him, but had a metal blade right here. Right?
Yeah.
Airman is a big old fan.
Yeah.
Quick Man looks really lean. Is almost always in like a sprinting
zip
position and has his weapon on the top of his head ready to go.
Yeah.
Things of that nature.
Interesting. I guess it's like, how do you personify that? I would have a hard time figuring out. So they probably were like, since we can't like identify with something, we have to go like to the total opposite, to like something zany,
Yes.
It's probably what it was. All right, cool. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really awesome information about the art and about that cool stuff that you love about the art. That was really, really awesome.
Why, thank you.
All right, so I think the next thing we're going to talk about is the music. This is like one of my absolute favorite aspects of the game. The music is composed by legendary composer David Wise. And what I learned about doing the research for this is that it was like his second thing that he worked on. Number 2.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah. And if you don't know who David Wise is, David Wise composed a ton of games. Obviously, the one that a lot of people know him the most for is Donkey Kong Country. He did every single Donkey Kong Country. He's done, let's see, what Marble Madness, Double Dare, which I was like, okay, that's very interesting. A Nightmare on Elm Street on NES.
That had a good track. Yep.
He did every single Wizards and Warriors game. So there's 4 in this series, and he did all of them. Mostly known for a lot of the Donkey Kong stuff. And, he did some stuff with Star Fox Adventure. That was pretty cool. He did the new Battletoads. He did Yooka-Laylee. And yeah, he's got like a very long list. Yeah, there's a long list of stuff in here. But this game and Donkey Kong Country is probably like the stuff that I know the most. But this game is definitely the one that I always was like, yo, if I ever met David Wise, I'd be like, man, that Wizards and Warriors 1 soundtrack, you really banged it out the park. When I looked it up, it seemed like there were 15 tracks. I couldn't really tell, because like whenever I searched like how many tracks are on Wizards and Warriors, like they also include the sound effects too.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was kind of throwing me off, but it seemed like if you count the levels, because there's 8 different levels, one of them I think is like, even though the levels kind of recycle, they switch the song and then they use the intro song when you turn on the game in one of the levels. So
that makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's also a different song for the boss. So that's probably why like each level will have 2 songs. So there's like the regular song for the level and then the boss song. So the intro song is definitely my favorite. I couldn't find any names of the tracks, but the intro song is definitely one of my favorites. The fire stage. Because it has kind of like this like brooding, like, like dark kind of like, it like has this like really brooding beat, which is like really, really nice. So
you kind of feel buried, right? Like almost underground.
Yeah.
point, right?
And that's what a lot of the game is. Like, I didn't realize until I was like looking up like the lore and stuff about the game is that you spend most of your time in caves underground. Like you're in, like there's 2 levels where you're up above, like in the forest, and then 2 levels where you're in the castle. But most of the rest of it is like half of the game is underground. So it makes sense that a lot of that music is kind of like, you know, a little bit darker, a little bit spookier. Yeah, it's really cool. And it's a lot of the songs are short and looping. It's interesting because you would think like music like that, you'll get tired of it really quick. But it's one of those soundtracks kind of like for me, like where it's like the longer I hear it, the more I want to hear it. Like I could speed run this game. Which you told me is like a very important thing about speedrunning. Like, make sure you can listen to the music for a very long time, because if you can't stand it, it's gonna like really destroy the experience of the game.
Big time. You're spot on with that. If you can't keep listening to the track, because if you're a speedrunner, you're gonna play the game 100 to 1,000 times minimum.
Yeah.
That's not even saying that you want to try to grind to some, you know, top tier level. So if you're thinking you're going to run the game 100 to 1,000 times, you got to hope that you like what you're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hope so.
Yep.
Otherwise, I would probably suggest avoiding it if you're not going to like the soundtrack.
Yeah, that's like a big reason why too. Like I like watching speedrunners because then it's like, okay, like I like watching their progress, but also I could listen to the game music in the background all the time.
Yes. Big time. And because like what's cool about it as well for a lot of the speed runs, depending on what type of game, what the speed run, you know, category may be, is that you get to listen from one track to the next. It just feels very fluid.
Yeah.
You're not stuck in just one level for 2.5 hours normally, where that's the only, you know, sounds you get to hear. But you're like, okay, from this track to this track to this track. Oh, that just sounds so good.
Okay, I actually can pull up the music because I do have it ready. I do have it ready, and I want people to hear. This is my favorite track in the game. Just let me know if it's a little. I'm gonna preemptively turn it down a little bit, and then bump it up. But this is my favorite track.
Bump it up.
This is my favorite track. This is the intro track when you first start the game. And I just feel like there's so much heart in this song.
It makes you want to start the whole quest.
I would literally leave the intro screen on for like 5 minutes just to listen to that song over and over and over again. And then I love how it does like this little fade out. I just really, really love like how it fades out and like all the little things that I wish I knew like more scientific stuff with music. People have remixed this. So OC Remix has a ton of really good remixes for this. And there's also this. So back in the days when it was hard to find licensed products of video games, I was always looking to see what was out there in the ecosphere. Like who's making stuff, even if it has to be like underground or whatever. And I found this band called The Advantage, and they did a CD with a bunch of like video game covers, and this was one of them. And I swear I would play that song every single day. I loved it so much because they did such a good job transposing it onto like guitar and like drums and stuff like that. It's so good. So
that is so cool. One of my favorite for this game actually is once you've beaten a boss and you have that really intense music.
Yeah.
It's the victory music when you go to, you know, cut down the princess, save the princess that was stuck there.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like it was so rewarding. You're like, oh, I did it. I really did it. Like you felt like you accomplished something big.
Tension of knowing you were about to defeat a boss, about to like get into a boss battle, especially when you were getting into that section with the cave and then the music changed and then you're like, oh man, this is gonna be the boss battle. Man. So good. Okay, so I'll pause that and then we could start talking about some of the Mega Man music.
The soundtrack for Mega Man 2 was actually composed by Takashi Tatashi, and it was credited as Ogaretsu-kun, and the reason why is that was the name at that point in time that the pseudonym, so that he didn't get any of the publicity on him, didn't want fame, really just wanted to work on the project, because also this was a project of love, because they didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. You know, and so at that point in time decided to, well, in case this doesn't work out so well, let's just go ahead and use a pseudonym. Obviously it went really, really well, and so eventually, as time goes on, starts to take more and more credit for the work that was done for it. The original Mega Man composer, Manami Matsume, again, also same idea, credited differently, included for having her work on the credits theme from the first game repurposed for the title screen of Mega Man 2. So when you hear Mega Man 2's title screen, actually that is a repurposed version of one of the tracks from the original game.
Oh.
So if anyone felt like, you know what, when I hear the Mega Man 2 startup screen, I really feel lots of, you know, flavors, shades of Mega Man 1. And
Yeah.
you do.
I think out of all the Mega Mans, I mean, I've played Mega Man. Hold on. I've played Mega Man 1, Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3, and Mega Man X. Mega Man 2 is my #1 favorite soundtrack of all time.
I'm so glad to hear that. When it comes to my Mega Mans, Mega Man 2 is my favorite. Mega Man X, and then Mega Man 3. Those will be my top 3 for the Mega Man series in that order, just because I felt those were just so well polished. Not that these other titles weren't good or even great, it's just they felt well-rounded. So again, when talking about the aspect of the music for this game, this is one of the big components for a lot of people's nostalgic attachment to it. Came to the soundtracks, because this game did a really good job of making every single level individualized. So all 8 Robot Masters, their music is completely different. The tones that it picks is intentionally supposed to, if you are going pretty close to uninhibited, so like a lot of speedrunners, what happens is when you're watching their runs through the game, and most of the time they're going through uninhibited, is that the music is supposed to match what you are facing on the screen at that time.
Wow.
So when the beat drops in certain parts, or when it feels like the tension and the climax is building, it's because you're supposed to be presented at that part, in that part of the level or stage, with that type of obstacle to overcome, and that music's supposed to kind of give you the cues on what's about to happen. And what's funny is in one of the levels of the speed run, is because, you know, you're trying to go casual, you're trying to go as quickly as you can, is that in Quickman's level, where you kill off the enemies that have the fire on their head, that fire lights up the entire room, but when they're dead, there's no, it's all dark now.
What?
And there's a part where you need to jump up onto a ledge, and you can't see it because it's dark. And if you were trying not to lose any time, you want to be able to jump up to it as soon as possible. And so as long as you are going unimpeded through that section, and as soon as the bass finally hits on that song, that's when you're supposed to jump. You jump right then and there, and you'll get up to the platform, no problem. And it's such an interesting aspect to Mega Man 2, and I know they tried to keep that going for a lot of the series, but there became some dissonance as far as that congruity for every single title. That's what it's supposed to do, is the music's actually supposed to tell you what to expect on the screen. Now that doesn't mean, oh, okay, high tempo, I know exactly what enemy. It's like, hey, this is going to be a room that's going to be confusing, or this is going to be a room that is going to require you to have to do a lot of jumps. That was the idea behind a lot of the ways they set up the music for this game.
I feel like with a lot of games, right? And especially now, what you're saying makes so much sense, because like I feel like music really, really enhances what's going on the screen. I feel like sometimes we take that for granted. Like we're all just like, oh, it's the visuals, it's the controls or whatever. But music and sound cues, if you ever try to play a game with the sound off, you will realize how much of a different experience that actually is versus when you have everything going on together. Like you need those sound cues to like know that you hit an enemy or know that something's about to happen. And I think like one really cool aspect of this is, I believe it's Mega Man 2, where there's a part where you're getting close to the end of the game, and then there's a part that's silent.
Yes.
And
You're right.
that part to me speaks equally loud as the part where when you know like you're about to fight a boss and then the music changes. Because you know something serious is about to happen.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because it is trying to give you that calm before the storm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And you actually have an emotional response to a video game.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing to get across to people who don't play video games. Like a lot of the older generation, I was very thankful that my mother was really big into video games, and then through that, my dad as well. Not as much as my mom, but he also had an appreciation for it. But then when talking to friends' parents about games and hearing how they had a very negative outlook, they didn't understand that you really could have this kind of impact by something as simple as the music in a game.
Yeah. Yurette is saying good music can make even a bad game stand out like Silver Surfer.
Very good point.
Yeah. And there are tons of games where I can think of where it's like, oh man, I don't know about this gameplay, but the music is really good. The music is really good. Or like you'll get to like a part that you have to do 1,000 times, which I'm sure with Mega Man, lots of people experience this because this game is not easy. Like you're like, ah man, I want to break my controller, but at least I get to jam out to this good music,
Exactly right. It's funny you say that because like a lot of games, like I see Shockwave's talking about your Final Fantasy 6s and Chrono Triggers, which are two of my two favorite games of all time.
So good.
Even when you are dying on some of the, or slain or whatever word they use instead of dying, even the music on those cutaway death scenes are that you're like, okay, even though I died, like this music still is like really, really good.
Yeah. If you ever die in like Zelda 1, you're like, oh man, that music's so sad, but I know. At least I get to start again,
It's so true.
Yeah.
Let's see here. To continue on with the music of Mega Man 2, one of the big ideas that they wanted was that the game needed to have varying moods.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny is that Kitamura, one of the other individuals who needed to have say because of being, a leader of Capcom, was like, you know what? I really feel that this soundtrack is too cute right now.
Mm-hmm.
To show you where this came into play was a single fragment of this declined concept remains in the game as Crash Man's stage theme.
Mm-hmm.
So Crash Man's level actually is following along the lines of that original idea that no, you can't have the music this way, it's too cute. Well, they decided we're going to do it anyways. But they had to somehow still listen to their boss in some respects. And that's where Crash Man's stage comes into play, where hey, this is what we did. We listened to you. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the result of us listening to you. That is so, man, I didn't see, and it's cool, like in doing this, just learning so much about like the lore and the history and how some of these things happen. I would have never thought that so much big brain ideas went into like the music and like the pacing for these games, until you it's like you don't know until you know.
Yes, correct. To build on that is when we're talking earlier about the limitations of the data on these cartridges, it actually affected this game's music, because the music's the last thing that's being added on as far as this one, how they had to handle it back then. The music's the last layer that's being added onto it, right?
Yeah.
So what they had to do is they had to cut songs. There was actually even more tracks for this game that they were ready to put in there, and they couldn't. And where you're going to see this is actually in Wily 1's stage and Wily 2's stage. You're going to be like, but Wily 1's is one of the best tracks ever.
Yeah.
But what they had to do to make sure it fit is they were able to work around. This is why this game is so praised for its music, is with those data limitations, they were now forced to use only the first 8 measures of the song. And for any of you out there that understand music to that level, you'll be like, wait, that makes more sense now when I'm listening to it. And what they did is they just kept on multiplying it. And that was saving them space. So then when they go into Wiley 2, Wiley 2 has a whole track that they had dedicated for it, but they didn't ever, who knows where it is? No one knows the song still exists out there on somebody's, computer or some flash drive somewhere they make sure to keep on saving it, because what they did is they then went to Wiley 2 and they just settled down Wiley 1's level music.
Yeah.
And that's why Wiley 2's music sounds very similar, but it's different than that first Wiley level. They ran out of space.
That makes sense. I mean, the technology is still new, and I guess at that time they're still learning, what their developmental limitations were. So they had to revert to tools like that to make sure that the game was going to get done on time and things weren't going to be left out, or things were going to work, That is really, really interesting.
Bringing that up, my favorite, to kind of complete this whole idea, my favorite tracks for this game actually was Wiley 1. So like before I even knew this stuff, I was like Wiley 1. Then for the Robot Masters, it goes Crash Man, then Bubble Man.
Yeah.
And then my final favorite track was Wiley 2, but it's so funny to think that I like Wiley 2 so much only because it's like a remixed, lesser version of Wiley 1. It's like, oh, that makes more sense now.
Yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. And it also makes sense to me as to why, probably in Wizards and Warriors, they might have recycled a track, yes, because then it's like, oh, now I get why they had to. It's not because they, ran out of ideas. It's because the hardware had limitations. Man, that's so cool. I'm learning so much from you, Jen.
And likewise, and this is perfect because we were both able to put in extra time towards this stuff, and now we both get to learn from each other's hard work.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool. I'm trying to think. I don't know the names of the tracks. I think it might be Dr. Wiley's song. That's my favorite. But I think that's the one that's my favorite. But overall, man, cool. I love this entire soundtrack. So good. So good. Anything else you want to tell us about the super cool Mega Man soundtrack?
That's all that I have besides me just gushing about my personal aspect on it. But as far as filling in new pieces of information, I don't have anything that's actually substantial in that regard. I could just rant about what I love about it more.
Gotcha.
I just thought it was so cool that they, with the limitations, they created something that felt so diverse.
Yeah.
And when we have nowadays games, and I think you and I can both appreciate when a new age game has old school vibes.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, that's what I remember. That's why I love these old school games, is because you're recapturing that magic, because they did so much with such limited space that the creativity was just mind-blowing. Exactly.
That, you hit the nail right on the head. That is the exact reason why I really love games that look like old school games, for lack of a better term. I love seeing how people can use limited resources in a creative way, and that's always awesome to me. I don't know, that's always awesome to me.
Yep, same here. Totally.
All right.
Feel that. Yep.